Jumping into Neverwinter Nights, looking at some of the various character classes, building that list, building those ideas, exploring it from both the alpha meta and the role-playing perspective. Asking that question, what is it like to play this character? What are some of the ideas to play this class that we should be aware of? Some hidden gems, some different ways to play it, whether it's your first time through Neverwinter Nights or you're playing through some of the custom missions or making your way through the campaign again. And in this vlog, we're jumping into the Rogue, perhaps one of the most iconic D&D character classes. And the interesting thing about the Rogue, Neverwinter Nights, depending on your entry point, if you play tabletop Dungeons & Dragons, Neverwinter Nights, yes, it's a combat engine with role-playing aspects. And it does a good job at certain points masking the fact that it's a combat engine and you feel like you're playing a role-playing game. But the Dungeons & Dragons 3.5 system that Neverwinter Nights is based off of is extremely meta. It is extremely just min-max. And if you can max out the proper things, you just auto-win. We could call it being cheesy. We can call it being a Munchkin-type system. But that was the direction that Dungeons & Dragons was going at the time. And certainly D&D 5 right now shares some of those aspects, but it's a little bit more balanced and there's a little bit more of a shift in terms of how you want to play the game and how those opportunities present itself. So jumping into the Rogue, what we see is the ability to really, really play the meta in terms of skill abilities. On the attack side, you can use some decent weapons. You can pull in a lot of good feats. You've got that sneak attack bonus. So while you're never going to be able to put the damage output of a fighter, or you're never going to be able to put the damage output of, say, a second tier type warrior class, a monk or battle cleric, the fact that you can backstab, the fact that you have the ability to hide is so massive and so game breaking that eventually you hit a point in your character leveling and progression. This is before we even stack on magic items, that you're just inflicting massive amounts of damage and there's really not that much that other characters or encounters or monsters can do against it. So what we're going to see is pushing that aspect out. Now, you can also plant traps, and you can get those numbers up. That's kind of a diversion, and it's fun to do to break up the monotony of just backstabbing everything to death. But the Rogue is a very, very impressive fighting machine with the ability to hide. So let's talk about hide jumping into this, because you're going to get a lot of skill points. And the skill points open up, in my opinion, one of the funnest ways to play, combined with the ability, use magic item, aka use magic device, with the Rogue, and how Neverwinter, that engine handles that opens up other fantastic opportunities. But the idea between hide, the way that mechanic works is you have that skill. When you hide, the system makes a D20 check. It adds in your skill points. It adds in modifiers. It adds in any bonuses. Then it modifies it based on the condition for a difficulty check. That is compared against the encounter, the opponent, the monster, the situation, whatever, that's trying to spot you. If you hide as you move, if you break that, there's perhaps another test, but essentially once you're hidden, you're hidden. Now, the Shadow Dancer can hide in plain sight. I pull that in because it's easy to think at first, well, hide is balanced, because if you're not able to break line of sight, you can't hide. So if you're in the middle of a combat encounter, often what happens is you'll hide, you'll run up, you'll get behind, and you'll hit, you'll encounter. Do that damage. Then you're fighting, and it's like, well, I can't hide again. And now I'm not as tough as a fighter. You can run away. You've got speed. You've got other types of abilities. You can run away, hide, and then come back. You might have to leave your henchmen. You might have to leave some of your pets. You might have to leave some of your summons, depending on the module you're playing. But you don't need to be Shadow Dancer and hide in plain sight. That's nice. That's super broken. But the rogue and the ability to hide is just absolutely fantastic. Also taking into account, if you are surrounded, being able to deal out attacks of opportunity. And depending on the facing of the engine, you might also get some sneak attack. So that really kind of adds up. The rogue is a combat machine, and that's before you even go prestige and maybe dump into assassin or some other aspects. If we're just talking vanilla, straight build, it's potent. Now let's jump into the skill points, because the rogue gets a ton of skill points by default. And then, of course, if you're modifying by intelligence, depending on the build that you want, you might put a little bit into intelligence. I won't say it's a dump stat. You could kind of pull it back, but you're going to have lots and lots of points. Now, yes, you're going to put them into hide. You're going to put them into tumble. You're going to put them into the rogue type categories, spot and other things, but you have so many skill points. You can dump into bluff, intimidate. You can dump into the cross class skills. You can bump into appraise. You're going to have so much that this is fun, because from the perspective of playing in the campaigns and the modules, if you're going to continue your character across all of them, it opens up a lot of really neat role-playing aspects. You'll get some additional lines of dialogue. You'll be able to participate in different lines of dialogue. You'll get more gold. You'll be able to do stuff back and forth. It's not necessary for any of the games. It's not necessary for the campaign, but it's a lot of fun. And you won't have to make those hard decisions of like, do I want to go bluff? Do I want to go intimidate? Do I want to kind of go more diplomacy, persuade, that aspect? You're going to be able to get them all. Okay, use magic device, use any magic item. Massive, game-breaking, a ton of fun. And I'm gonna share with you one of my role-playing builds that I've played. This is based on a real-life D&D character that I normally play, and I've had a lot of fun with. Both as a dungeon master, using him as an NPC, but also playing him as a character. You can replicate something like this in Neverwinter Nights, which is a ton of fun, a lot of fun. So there's this idea, Neverwinter Nights, the magic items are more or less set. There's some random charts when you open up a chest. You notice how you get like gloves of concentration and gloves of animal handling like everywhere in the beginning levels of the game. But there are also some magic items, I'm not going to give any spoilers, that are named items that are specific to NPCs or specific to a quest. Some really powerful, some awesome, some, nice to have based on the level, then eventually you'll sell it for the gold. But the idea is, unlike pen and pencil, or tabletop, I should say, because we're virtual these days, Dungeons and Dragons, there is very little random magic item generation to give out these more powerful magic items. They're set from a list, with the exception of Infinite Dungeons. We'll put that aside for a moment. So what this means is the modules are balanced out where they don't know what class you're playing, so they're going to give you a little bit of everything, so you have something to experiment with. The rogue, every level you're dumping into UMD. Having the ability to use any magic item is absolutely badoinkers. It's crazy. Before we even combined with hide, before we even combined with stealth or sneak attack or anything like that, that's one of the broken things of D&D 3.5. You just pick it up and you're like, okay, cool. I know this. I'm good to go. That potency, that interest is really, really, really amazing from the meta perspective. From the role-playing perspective, it's a lot of fun too, because you get to just experiment with a bunch of stuff, and you get to play a bunch of stuff, and you get to enjoy some of the quirks and the unique abilities of these magic items, usable by everything. So here's a character that I've played, D. Magnus. He's a rogue, but he passes himself off as a wizard. This is the tabletop version when I play him in D&D. So he's dressed in mage's robes. He's got a staff. He's got some spell components. When you visually see him, he is a wizard, a magic user, if it's D&D 3.5 or 5.0. Behind the scenes, he's full rogue. And when I play him as a character, I don't tell the other party members, I don't say, hey, I'm a rogue. I just explain what my character looks like, and we go from there. I utilize sleight of hand. I use magic device. I utilize some wands and rods to pass myself off as a wizard, as a magic user, from that role-playing perspective. That I've played D in a number of 3.5/Neverwinter Night games. He can wear the robes. He can use the magic staff. It's not the most efficient gold-wise, but with certain appraise abilities and a high enough charisma, you're just awash in gold at some point anyway. I use scrolls. I use wands. I can pretty much free cast any of the magical abilities in the game. I use any of the items in the game, and it's a lot of fun to really, really play. It's almost like I'm playing a gold-based sorcerer/wizard. I don't have access to the high LAs, the high-level abilities, because I'm not a sorcerer or a wizard, but how far are we going to go, past level 20? That's a completely different consideration. So from that perspective, the rogue with Neverwinter Nights being built on D&D 3.5, it's all about min-max. The rogue can just max everything because of hide, because of backstab, because of skill points, because of use magic device. It just gets absolutely crazy. You have an answer for every single situation. Is it the most fun to play? I think from a role-playing perspective, it is. I'd second Bard, but I think from the role-playing perspective, it is, because it allows you to interact in every aspect of the adventure.